One. Greetings and welcome back, everyone. This is Into the Nexus, the podcast all about Heroes of the Storm. I'm Garrett, here as always with Kyle, and we are joined, finally, after some scheduling hell, I guess is what you might call it. Bahamut, you are joining us today for the first time ever. Welcome to the show, dude. Thanks for coming by.
Oh, it's an honor and a pleasure. I've been looking forward to this. I was actually texting one of my friends who introduced me to this show like 2-3 years ago. And I was just like, I'm going to be on that show that you introduced me to. He's like, all right, well, I'll have to check that out because I haven't had a chance to listen to it in a while. So I'm super excited to be here, and I'm ready to talk about Heroes of the Storm.
Nice. Well, this is exactly what we ask people to do, is literally like, just tell a friend to listen to the show. That's how you help the show. It's a great way to do it.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we appreciate you, our guest today, doing exactly that. That's awesome, man. Well, thanks for stopping by. If folks are unfamiliar with you, I mean, dude, you have a resume quite long in the Heroes world. You've done CCL, Heroes Lounge, Nexus Gaming Series, Division S, hell, even Bush League.
Tespa, Heroes Hype. I've done Open Division. So yeah, I've been around the block a little bit. Yeah, it's been a really fun experience casting and talking about this game. I honest to God, it's like the highlight of my day.
Well, then you're going to fit in here if you like talking about Heroes of the Storm, because that's what we do.
I mean, just to dive in.
Yeah.
We're often talking about the home experience. I'm excited to hear you talk about what amateur home experience but organized play looks like right now. Because I just participated in the CCL. You were casting it. Mm-hmm. And rank does not matter when you get together. The gold support is playing like a grandmaster, and the masters, well, they're still masterful, but you know what I mean? Like, what is your worldview of Heroes of the Storm?
It's really, really weird because like I'll go and I'll play Storm League or Quick Match or anything by myself, and it was something that I actually learned ages ago from playing with one of my friends, because I started casting and I would take that same mentality into games of Storm League or just Quick Match or whatever it was, and like at one point my friend was like, dude, you can't look at this game the same way because it's not a full 5v5. Like all of those are really, really difficult for me to actually like get my footing in at times, because you don't have that same kind of mentality, and like they don't see the draft. Like a lot of people don't see Juice Pirates coming down the list. Like that's something that like in a team oriented situation, you see a couple of those things come out. You see a Tyrael, you see a Greymane, and you're just like, we're going to ban that Lieutenant Morales, but that sometimes slides through. So it's really, really weird. And then, I mean, to get into it even further, when it comes to like divisions within leagues as well, each division has their own meta. And so when a good example was Jayhow and I were casting Tespa, the first couple weeks, like him and I would be talking about draft, and we'd be kind of surface level with a lot of our analytics, because you can't talk a whole lot about it until you actually sit in it for a while and you start to understand like, oh, okay, this team prioritizes that. This team like everyone kind of has what they really, really like. And that's where the meta start to form. I mean, CCL is a good example as well. Deathwing with, the 0% win rate, that became like a big storyline. Like, ooh, who's going to be able to break that Deathwing win rate and finally get a win? Of course, it was Turk. And so it's things like that where their own metas start to evolve and shape, and every single league is different. Every single division is different, and it's a blast. But at the same time, it's very, very confusing to also keep track too.
If you were to mention the key offenders of balance in organized play, who would they be? Like here in home, we can't stop talking about how Genji just has no point. There's no world in Storm League where Genji is more viable than like auto attack Tyrael practically. Mm-hmm. Do those opinions change in even the lower leagues of organized play?
I think what ends up happening in a lot of let's look at it like, let's go like top down. Let's go to like Division S or Division A or 1, however you want to look at it, heroic division. A lot of those teams are going to prioritize the high mechanical skilled heroes. So you're going to have things like Kael'thas, you're going to have things like Jaina, but you're also going to build synergies. You're going to look for Jainas with Raynor, so you get ace in the whole value. You're going to look for like, all right, well, we've got a Diablo, maybe we'll pair that Jaina in there, or excuse me, we have the Jaina Raynor, we'll grab a Diablo so we can maybe look for Apocalypse, or ETC's been popping up more, so you get the Ring of Frost and Mosh Pit. And it's all those things that they start to consider. When you start to move into the lower leagues, you start to see the same kind of thing where they have the idea of draft, but then you also see that there's one player in the team who shines above the rest. And that's when you get you get like Genjis pop up more often because no matter what, they're hard to kill. I think it was back in TESPA Collegiate Series, Genji really wasn't played that much, but it was Colorado School of Mines. There was a player named Time. And when they got on Genji, they could carry an entire team just because they were really, really good at that hero and really mechanically skilled. So it's so weird that, you know, things will pop up like when Anduin came out, Light Bomb Genji, like that was the jam. And then there's also Light Bomb, there's Light Bomb Falling Sword, and that's not a thing. Like neither of those things are things anymore. We found other ways, like I've seen Light Bomb Maev, which is actually a really cool adaptation. So you use the Spirit of Vengeance to blink forward as you have that thrown onto you, so you can actually pop into the enemy team backline. So it's those adaptations that you get at the higher tier that are really, really interesting, whereas you fall towards the lower half, you're going to be having a lot more players who have comfort picks, or maybe you just have someone who's just really, really strong on something like a Genji, and they'll get it a couple times and it's banned out for the rest of the entire season. So that's the hard part. It's like balance and like win rates towards the upper divisions. Those are pretty much like they transfer 1-to-1. When you get to lower divisions, like when I'm casting and doing analytics, I'm like, I don't really know how to break down this draft because they'll draft 3 tanks and like a healer and a Vol, and it's like, okay, all right, well, this is going to be a thing in this match.
Do you find that more, is it more interesting in a way? Like, what do you prefer more?
Yes.
Like, okay, I was going to say, because that, to me, it's like, oh, cool. It's like my game's at home. It makes no sense, and I'm not quite sure what my experience is going to be from one game to the next, and I have to continuously find ways to adapt.
I was actually, someone in my chat was asking me this like a month or so ago. It was actually Kaleo, and they were saying like, do you cast differently for different leagues? And I started actually breaking it down in the middle of a match just because, you know, we have caster brains and we're all fishes. And so I was just jumping around to like all these different things. But like the way that I look at it is like when you get to the upper divisions, you mostly focus on like what's there and what's happening and what could happen. Whereas in the lower divisions, when you get to that mid to, you know, when you get to like divisions like 2 and 3 or C and D in like Nexus Gaming Series or Heroes Lounge, I tend to actually change the way that I talk about the game a little bit differently. Like I start to talk more about camp timings and things that you can learn in the game. So I try and teach more towards the lower end and try and do more like casting and analytics towards the top. I still do all of that in the lower end, but I feel like there's more opportunities to point out things that are wrong, but not to say like, oh, that's wrong, don't do that, you're bad at the game. No, it's like, all right, well, you lost this, but then explaining why it happened and kind of making it a teachable moment. So that's kind of the transition. And that's also what I like about it too, is because I enjoy teaching through the casting. And I think in those lower leagues, you can learn a lot. Even when you're a strong, you know, Division A player or you're a grandmaster, you can still watch lower leagues and see things that are going wrong and also learn and be like, well, I've done that before. Like, oh, I realized like seeing it from this perspective, that's not good. So there's different ways you have to look at the game and different ways you have to cast it. But when you get to those lower leagues, the probably the worst part about it, and this feels wrong saying it, but is just ending games. Teams in lower leagues do not know how to end games. They will wipe the enemy team. It's 20 minutes in. There's 45 seconds on the death timers. There's no keeping bottom, and they'll back off and go get the Punisher to make sure they end. It's like, you can just rush core. You got this. So it's things like that, and you can teach through those moments. But the fights are a little bit more interesting because they're a little bit more chaotic. Everyone's all over the place, but still jumping back to like S division, you get people like Liam, who's on, you know, Urel half the time 1v4ing. I mean, CCL is a good example of that as well. I mean, Liam on Urel throughout CCL was just like, how are they going to live through this 1v3? And that's when it's also like, well, we can make this a teachable moment too. So you kind of have to look at it in all perspectives, but lower leagues are more fun because it's a lot more chaos and you start to get those like niche Probius picks too.
When it comes to lower leagues and the win condition you were talking about there, looking from the outside, it seems like a lack of siege damage is often the problem. And as we go super high, there's also like a lack of siege damage issue that can happen when one team thinks they can take the core, but we don't have that Nazebo. We don't have a Zul'jin, one of these crazy burners to actually complete the job. Do you think we should be drafting? We don't think about siege damage when we're drafting. We think about CC, lane coverage, solo lane, double soak. Where does that land?
It's this awkward spot, honestly, because I'm thinking back to my own casting, because I'll look at a draft and it's typically like tank, bruiser, healer, you know, ranged assassin, mage. But then you have to consider like, all right, well, what are you going to use to grab camps? Greymane. Well, Greymane actually grabs camps and he also sieges really, really well. All right, then what do we need to push into that as well? All right, let's grab a Sylvanas. Let's lock down the tower. So some of those things start to pop up here and there, but I think it's not considered all the time. I think some teams, they'll go to Battlefield of Eternity and be like, we want to win the race and we want to win the team fight, and the Immortal will do our siege for us, which isn't a bad way to look at the game because you are going to have that mechanic to do it. But if you are going to be losing constantly and you do get a win up at some, or if you take a good fight, then you need to actually have that siege without the Immortal, and that's where it kind of gets a little awkward. So I think there's like a weird priority on the team fight and on the map, but there's not a whole lot of priority onto how are we going to push through this map in some situations.
You're starting to paint a clearer picture of why I think I like Sylvanas so damn much, but that's really interesting, and it's something because we frequently talk about like the differences between all of the battlegrounds, and I think it's a really easy thing for a lot of players of Heroes of the Storm to kind of focus on. Is like per battleground, what am I doing differently? Yep. We don't maybe talk as much about the similarities, and one of the big ones that you just pointed out is the fact that pretty much every damn objective in this game in some way leads to siege damage. Even on Towers of Doom, which is one of the more unique kind of outlying objectives in the game, it's still how you end the game. So it's I find that fascinating.
I mean, same note as Towers of Doom as you just brought up. It's, you don't technically need to have siege damage because as long as you're controlling bottom lane and you win the bottom lane and you're just feeding sappers through, you don't really need to worry about siege because mid and top is just going to be double soaked by whoever, and you're just going to put your core 4 in bottom. And this is typically what we see at the higher ends because you can then feed in sappers and you can keep the enemy team down there because they want to regain that bell tower. Or they try and gank your solo laner and then you lose core health because they're just feeding sappers in. So it's this like, we're going to win every single team fight and we don't need to worry about our siege outside of just getting one of the bell towers down in bottom lane. And I think that's exactly it. Like, they look at the map mechanic and go, well, siege has really fallen off. And I wonder if that's something that down the road that's just revisited in some way, shape, or form as a mechanic in the game. Like, do the objectives push less? And now there's a new focus on, bringing back things like Zagara, Sylvanas. You have Sergeant Hammer, these range heroes that can siege really, really well. I mean, even Rexar, for example, actually sieges quite well on their own, and they can push lanes so kind of indefinitely. So it's things like that. That'd be a cool mechanic just to see in the future. Like if we had a week of just like things were weakened push wise, so you had to focus on that siege once again. I wonder how that would change the mechanics in the game.
So do you notice the lack of siege more for teams that are currently behind and like losing the objective? And you're like, okay, well now they could go take a fort, but they are kind of lacking in siege damage. Is that when it becomes the most apparent?
I'd say it's like if a team like in the later half of a game gets a good team fight and most of the time it's just them rotating around and just picking up experience. Cause I think the big thing at that point is them just saying like, all right, we need to close that experience gap that we had beforehand. And we're also just getting our map back in order. Here and there, you'll see like Infernal Shrines is a good example. When a team knows they're not going to win the shrine, they'll just rotate to the furthest lane. So if it's in top, they'll rotate to bottom and just take a tower or take an entire fort. And sometimes that can be slow to the point where they're all going to hearth back and the Immortal that was gotten by the enemy team is already on their fort. So it's apparent, but it's not always. Like, there's teams that definitely draft for siege and everything, but there's teams that just completely ignore it and go, we want a team fight, we're going to win. And if we win the team fight, we get the objective, and that's just all of our siege we need. So it's like it hops around here and there overall.
It's fascinating.
Mm-hmm.
Coming back to a thing you said about, when you get kind of lower down the leagues in terms of play, you said one thing you notice over and over again is that players have issues ending. That seems to be a trend.
Yes.
That aside, is there anything else that stands out to you? Like if anything else at the top of your, like we're on a podcast, we've got a decent amount of listeners. Anything you really would like players at home to work on that you see as a trend kind of in lower end play?
Wave clear, I think. I think a lot of teams don't value wave clear on some maps that are very wave clear heavy. Tomb of the Spider Queen being one of them. I've seen teams that have 0 wave clear, and even my chat's just sitting there. They're just like, I don't know about this one, Bahamut. I'm like, well, you know what? We'll stay positive. We'll see how this goes, and they'll win team fights. But what ends up happening is it comes back to siege. I mean, the enemy team keeps rotating between top and mid. They get all the gems they need, and while you may win the team fights, you may push them back or stop them from getting turn-ins constantly, once they do get a turn-in and they have that momentum on you, it's going to be really, really hard to defend, because while you do need Siege to push towers, you also need Siege to defend your towers too. So it's in that same light, and in same thing with wave clear too. It's just teams don't consider it all the time, and I'll like sit there and harp on like, get a Jaina, get a Gul'dan, get a Kael'thas. Like if you're a 5-stack or you're a team that plays in any sort of league, have someone on your team that can play one of those 3 heroes, because you are going to need them in some way, shape, or form. Brax's holdout's great for Gul'dan because of zone control. You have, Jaina and Kael'thas are great on Tomb of Spider Queen because of their level 1 Fingers of Frost or Mana Addict, and it's a rotation heavy base map, so you're going to constantly get regeneration globes from top to mid. So it's just things to consider, is just outside of, Siege or ending game, is also your wave clear. Like you need to be able to match the enemy team in rotation and experience, and if you end up getting ahead and you finally have that break in the later half of the game when you can start managing your lanes, having a Kael'thas, Gul'dan, or a Jaina, anything like that to clear the wave very quickly so you can start building back your momentum is a huge factor. So that's
questions for you.
Yeah. Sorry, I'm going on rambles here. Cut me off whenever.
Great. Well, you're a caster. The other guy's supposed to interrupt you, so it's perfect.
Mm-hmm.
How does that look? Is it because there are very fine ways that lane clear is done optimally?
Mm-hmm.
The Jaina runs out, does a Cone of Cold, Blizzard, like it's wrong now. Can you run through the 3 mages and what that lane clear in a mana efficient world looks like?
Oh boy. Are we considering the fact that they probably have a Johanna with them?
Well, that would be my part too. So,
because I was going to say, I was like, usually, so let's say with a Johanna, you're typically just, you rotate into lane. She steps up, the Johanna. Your mage is behind them. You never want to be in front of your tank. That's actually something I learned on this podcast years ago. Don't stay in front of your tank. And so you'll have the Condemn come out from Johanna, the big circle thing that pulls them in, and Jaina throws a Blizzard at that point. That's all you need. You don't need the Cone of Cold. Gul'dan can actually throw a Fell Flame or 2, I think, should clear the wave. Kael'thas with 1 Flame Strike should clear it out. They might need to throw a Chain Bomb, but then they could actually throw the Chain Bomb, leave the Johanna to pick up the gems, and then rotate back into mid. So they're just getting all those, and then the Regeneration Globe should grab them. On the opposing side, when you're on your own, you need to be using your abilities. So like Gul'dan, I would say hold your Corruption because it's a 14-second cooldown, if I'm not mistaken. And so unless you have these cooldown reduction talent at level 7 off your Fell Flame, it's a bit of a waste in my opinion. So it's just you kind of need to rely as a Gul'dan on Tomb of Spider Queen's a little bit slower because you're just mostly benefiting from the Fell Flame. But Jaina, you go ahead and you drop your Blizzard, you drop your Cone of Cold, and then you probably auto through the last little bit of damage you need. If you have Piercing Ice Lance, I think you can use that as well. And then for the Kael'thas, it's the same thing. You use your Flame Strike, you empower your Flame Strike, and then you use your Chain Bomb to get the burst value, and then that way you can clear the wave quickly and then rotate in. That's typically what I see a lot of teams doing to maximize and quickly clear if they're on their own as one of those mages.
So the part 2 with Johanna, Johanna's ban on Tomb of the Spider Queen, which she should be. And we don't really want to have that chance out there. What is the pickup tank for it? Because tanks are so good at being the gem collectors. ETC Echo Pedal is at level 7.
Yep.
Who's next in line behind Johanna?
At this point, from what I've seen, Mal'Ganis. He's really, really annoying to deal with. He can actually get in your face, so he can kind of step into the enemy team who's also trying to clear the wave and be that nuisance, forcing them back out a little bit. That gives your mage more time to clear the wave and also makes your mage feel safer. Like the job of the tank is to protect the team, but also in those situations, you also need to be a bit of an aggressor and pushing back the enemy side. Something like if you have, we're talking, and this is like maybe like a 2v2 situation. Let's assume that, some players are for some reason in bottom lane. You want to poke from the back line. You don't really want to focus on damaging the enemy hero unless you are a Gul'dan. You're looking for that Echo Corruption at level 1 to get your 40 stacks. Then, yeah, you might want to throw that out and look for those players in the waves. But overall, Mal'Ganis is really strong. If we're still on Tomb of the Spider Queen, ETC is a good disruptor. Garrosh does all right just because he can actually step up, and there's that threat of the potential toss constantly that people are like, oh, no, I don't want to be here. But at that same time, you have to consider what Garrosh is going into, because if it's a Raynor or something, then Raynor's just going to penetrating round every single time they try and step up. So it changes. It changes here and there. But yeah, overall, I'd say like ETC, Mal'Ganis, and Garrosh, those are the ones that I see a lot more prioritized when it comes outside of Johanna.
So I've got a surprise part 3 for you.
I love it.
Li Ming gets picked very early on. Do we Yes. Do we pick a lane clear mage, or do we accept that that's spell damage and find other avenues?
You take Hanzo. You take Hanzo and you go into explosive arrows at level 4, and that's actually what I see a lot of teams do. The range between Hanzo and Li Ming is pretty good. Or if you're not a Hanzo player and you don't want to do double range, Greymane at that point. Greymane actually in Worgen form can clear up really quickly. He can actually set up a lot of good damage for Li Ming that way she can capitalize on a kill, or vice versa, where she can whittle people down that you have go for the throat, or even just that dark flight from Greymane. He can dive in. That's a reset for Li Ming. So personally, like, I'm not the biggest fan of Li Ming on Tomb of Spider Queen. I feel she's so hindered in so many different ways. She can get value because there's a lot of tight corridors. There's a lot of areas where, she gets that pop off value, but it's far and few between, in my opinion. And you're probably safer with some of those other mages.
I like that direct answer. 2 options following the Li Ming. Well done.
You mentioned Hanzo, and I'm like, I don't know. This isn't like my language. I don't see Hanzos almost ever. And then you're like, or Greymane. I'm like, thank you for bringing it home for the rest of us.
It's 50. Like, I honest to God, I see both, because like I'll sit there and I'll be like, oh, they could Hanzo here, and then they teams will, and I see the value for Hanzo. Like, I was casting a game yesterday, and there was a Hanzo who had 73,000 heroic damage in 13 minutes.
I mean, I'm not trying to talk down on the Hanzo. I agree with all the points you brought up. It's just
sometimes it's player to player, and some players just got really, really good on Hanzo, and I think his mobility is a really big factor for him as well, especially on Tomb of Spider Queen, because there's so many different areas where you can use the agility to get away from a hairy situation.
Yeah, makes a lot of sense. So I'm kind of curious, I don't mean to go one level even deeper with kind of the same analogy or same kind of scenario that Kyle's throwing at you, but I'm curious because I'm always curious on translating when you take in so much coordinated play, how do you compartmentalize that, or is there something you take with it to kind of your pickup games at home? What if, you find say you are the mage in all the scenarios we just talked about and ways to empower your lane clear in a rotating map, whether it's Tomb of the Spider Queen or not. What do you do if you're Johanna in that situation? It kind of farts off and doesn't kind of stops rotating or never starts rotating in the first place. Do you, as someone who has taken in a lot of knowledge of the correct way to do things, like, how do you respond to that in your game at home when it's like, damn, the tank's not rotating?
If anything, like, I'll try and just be like, hey, I need a little bit of help in wave clear. That's typically like an easy thing. Making your tank feel important is probably the best way to make them, want to follow you around. Like, it's the same thing like a healer. Like, if anyone has ever played a healer, and what my best friend has told me these stories, and that's why I'm specifically going from this, is that if you constantly run in and you die, they will stop healing you. Like, I have healer friends who are just like, there's no point healing them because they're just going to keep charging in and dying. I'd rather not waste my cooldowns, not waste my mana on someone who's just going to die. I'll keep someone else alive. So it's one of those things where you kind of have to be like, you'd be like, hey, can I get some help in rotations? It'll make it quicker. We can get more experience and we can start to build momentum. That's typically the go-to. If they ignore me still, I'll try and get someone else to join me. And if that doesn't work, I just continue to do my rotations, watch the minimap, and know when I'm supposed to be there for a team fight. Just watching for when my team's inting. Like, let's say essentially they just stick in mid lane. Let's just keep using Tomb of Spider Queen as the example. I'll continue to just make rotations to top lane. I'll go up there, get my regeneration globe, come back down, and then just have that be the thing. I'll point out maybe like, hey, I'm not the best person to have all the gems on, because if I die with my 2,000 health pool, it's going to be a bad go. So sometimes, like, putting it on them in a sense, but not being super negative is the way that I always lean into it. Because if you ever meet someone with just like, hey, this is the standard, this is what we should do, most people are going to be like, no, I don't want to listen to you. Like, and then they meet you. Or you get response from a Nova who's just like, coordination of my games, get out of here. So 50-50. So it's just one of those things like, go ahead.
Yeah, I like your perspective, because you targeted the lane clear as the issue, not the Johanna.
Exactly.
This activity requires more friends, not we missed you last night and call them out.
I mean, this is pretty freaking on brand for the show, right? I think it's been a while, Kyle, since you and I have kind of sat down and had a kind of a deep conversation about like the social aspects of the game and how to at least up your chances of a positive social interaction, because it's never going to be perfect. There's always going to be easily tiltable people out there, or maybe people that came in tilted already. But you know, yeah, we used to talk about this stuff all the time. And so, yeah, Bahamut, like what you're getting at is like, you get them stoked on it. Like you want to, I don't know, sound less like a supervisor or a manager being like, excuse me, I'm sorry, but could you maybe report to lane more often? Like you don't want to sound like that. You want to be like, oh man, hey, let's get this rotate going. We can really mess with them. Like get people stoked, make it sound fun, make it sound like something you actually want to get in on. I like that. That is a much better way to approach things.
Exactly. As long as you make someone feel like it's not their fault, and then you're kind of inviting them, like you want to invite them, and like I try and keep things positive, because the moment you start accusing people of things, that's when they get defensive and they don't want to do, like they will purposefully do the opposite of what you want. Like I'm sure there's examples in real life where like someone's told you to do one thing and just like, no, I'm going to go do this instead, because it's just like the way it came about. And and it's the same thing here as the storm. There's people who just tilt off the moon after one little thing. And there's people who can take that. The biggest thing that I actually found in those tilting situations, and the two players are arguing, I actually found that typing just play works a lot. For some reason, when people keep arguing and you just type just play every single time they're being keyboard warriors, that seems to shut them up and people just start to play the game.
That and we're good. I see that one a lot too, and you're right. It's kind of, I mean, this is competitive at the end of the day. A lot of this comes from a competitive nature, and it's also like that's something you could do in traditional sports. Is like people are going to get hot-headed. They're going to get in their own head about things and start lashing out. And sometimes it just takes one little like, hey, this isn't over yet. Let's just keep going. It's fine. It's fine. You can call each other names. Let's keep murdering fools.
I've had it work to the point where we had this is ages ago. This was when Haunted Mines was still a ranked rotational map. So this is that long ago, where there was a Nova who was trolling us, and at one point, like I was just typing to the four other people there, like one of the guys was just like, "Oh, I'm giving up, done. Like I'm done with this. This is stupid." And I was just like, you know what? Let's just keep playing. If we lose, we lose, but let's just try hard. Let's see how it goes. We actually won that game. The Nova was actually body blocking me through our own gate at one point. And the Nova started the Nova wasn't winning with the troll, or wasn't like forcing the game to lose. So they actually started playing with us at a point. So there's this weird dynamic where if you just like keep playing the game and you try your hardest, there's actually a point where trolls actually will just give up and be like, well, I'm here. I might as well like.
Yeah, the forcible joining, right? This person is not joining anything. So all four of us are going to sit on top of them and make this a functional comp by force.
It worked. I will never forget that game. I don't know. It was not that big of a deal, but it was just like we won it, and it was just like overcoming the troll. It was just really cool. And so just positive mentality is like a big thing in a lot of these games, just to kind of cycle back to what you were talking about. If there's no one helping you, if you really want to get help, calling someone out and being like, you're not doing your job, you can do that, absolutely, but you're gonna get a negative reaction. Aggression meets aggression. If you're nice and you try to be like, hey, I need some help, or pinging 500 times is not the same thing either. Don't do that. Pinging 500 times, that just pisses people off. So just one little message: if they don't do it, adjust your game style. If you lose, you lose. Move on to the next game.
Now, let's shift gears for a moment. We were talking a little bit before we started the show about just what's going on around the Heroes water cooler, as it were. And a big thing this week is on the subreddit, a petition for HTC to return.
Yes,
started making the rounds. What I'm straight up. What are your thoughts on this?
I mean, as like I was talking about this last night on stream, and that's why I was bringing it beforehand too. As someone who literally watched 7 days of Heroes of the Storm, like no joke, like Monday, Tuesday was like Korea, like Wednesday, Thursday was like Open Division, rewatching most of it. There'd be I think it was like Thursday was like SEA, Friday, Saturday, Sunday was North America, Europe, and Korea. So I was watching HGC constantly. I loved it. It was the most passionate esport I've ever been about. That was the first couple lanes I went to as well. And I would love nothing more than HGC to come back, but there are too many outlying factors. I mean, you have multiple people fired from a single email. You have just all this negative. There's a giant negative cloud around all of this. So as much as it'd be cool to have all of that back again in the Open Division, all this in Korea and China and in North America, Europe, it's just not a viable thing. There's too many negative things that have happened in between then and now. And realistically, if you really, really wanted to support the Heroes of the Storm scene, the best thing to do is invest in the grassroots. Like, you have Nexus Gaming Series and Heroes Lounge. I know there's tons of other stuff. I mean, there's CCL, there's stuff like that. But those two are literally two leagues that have been around for ages at this point. Nexus Gaming Series is ending their season number 8 for North America. Heroes Lounge is on like season 10, I think, for Europe, and they're in season 4 of North America, and they've been around for a while. Both these leagues communicate, and they have back-to-back seasons. So Nexus Gaming Series is just ending this week, and Heroes Lounge just started up like a week or so ago. And if you really want to like make something happen, have Nexus Gaming Series have like an S division, have Heroes Lounge have an S division, have 2 different seasons, and have prize pools that go into those. There's currently, if you didn't know, there's funding for both North America and EU. And I hope I'm all right for plugging this on the channel. But
oh, of course, no.
Heroes Lounge, North America and Europe both have prize pools right now. I was looking at that before the podcast. Europe's around 1,200. North America's just about 600. So if you want there to be grassroots, and if you want to do something for the Heroes community, like petitioning for HGC, I get it. Like, I miss it and I want it, but take that effort, take all that drive, and take any money you'd like to give and put it towards the things that exist right now. Like, that is the best direction we can take things, because there's a community, there are admins like Nexus Gaming Series and Heroes Lounge. They kill it with their admin work. Like, I think probably it takes about at max 5 minutes for me to get an admin like talking to me when there's an issue. And that's really good. I mean, that's one random, message to 4 different people, and someone gets back to you instantaneously. So support what's already here. Like, we don't need to revive something and try and bring all that back. Because could you imagine, just put yourself in this position. You were a caster that was fired by an email, and then they ask you to come back. I'm not itching to go to do that, because I'd be worried about something like that happening again if things just go belly up. So just support what's here. Like, we have a lot of good stuff, and I think not a lot of people focus on that. They're just like, well, I want pros again. It's like, we have pros right now. We have S Division. That is our pro scene. We have Heroic Division. That's a pro scene from Nexus Gaming Series. And while it might not be fan and cattle and stuff like that, it still is a lot of really talented players, and they should get the support. So that's my plea to the Heroes of the Storm community is go out there and venture and find this stuff. It's not that hard to find. There's a sticky Reddit thread, I think, every single week of like all the matches you can find, at least for S Division as well. So go there and just look. Like, Reddit typically has posts. I mean, Twitter, it's not hard to find either. So just that's my soapbox. Just go out there and look for if you want to watch good Heroes of the Storm, there's tons of good streamers as well. Like even outside of me, outside of Caldor, there's like Tetcher. He's still casting. You still have tons of people in the Heroes of the Storm community in North America. I was just blanking on a bunch of them. Paradox is one. You have, I guess, Moist Weenus. That's another one as well. I wasn't sure if
there's this Kyle guy I'm a really big fan of.
Excuse me?
There's this Kyle guy I'm a really big fan of.
Yes, Kyle.
We're already here. It's fine. You're already listening to the show.
It's a joke.
Overall, all I'm saying is that we don't need to revive something. We should enjoy the memories we had of HGC, but we need to create new ones with the things that we already have. And that's kind of my way to kind of encapsulate everything. Is just, there's a lot out there, and it still needs your support as well.
Yeah, well, I find the psychology of it fascinating, because I not to go like old man gamer boomer on his front porch, but like when I got into esports, it was the beginning of Wings of Liberty, StarCraft 2, before Twitch TV even existed, and it was minorly invested in by Blizzard. It wasn't Blizzard just being like, here's WCS, but it was years before we got to WCS.
Exactly.
It was not necessarily grassroots, because there were still some rather large, especially in South Korea, businesses behind it, but it was still this kind of natural thing that was born out of just a inevitability that there was such a desire for this from the community that it just popped up. And that's how, for the longest time, longer than Blizzard just throwing money at the equation, that's how esports came about. And also, since then, StarCraft 2 has continued going, even though it's not at its peak popularity that it was, kind of at the peak of Wings of Liberty and the height of like Heart of the Swarm. And the same goes for, granted, the game's having issues right now, but Warcraft 3, that esports scene has stayed alive forever without any major spotlight on it at all, because the community just keeps it going. So I don't see why Heroes of the Storm cannot happily continue that way, which it has been doing.
Well, but it's the Game of Thrones factor. It's
where the hell are you going with this?
I'm not really a fantasy person. I'm talking as the example here. Mm-hmm. So I'm not really a fantasy person. You know, I don't really watch like dramas, but everyone I know won't shut up or stop watching this Game of Thrones thing. And it is so easy to Google, so easy to find, so easy to get into viewing parties by saying I'm a fan of this, that I ended up in a community by chance. And I feel like that is the big struggle right now for a lot of people. It's the boy band factor. There's just not enough people screaming one name, one channel, one time to make this a thing. And how do we reach that HGC level? The reason you watch HGC if you're not a fan of esports is because it's going to be all over your Storm League. Well, Hero League at that time.
Yeah.
That one hero wins for the weekend, you're going to have to deal with that hero nonstop, particularly in a first pick order kind of environment like we had back then. Like, you need to know how to play Medivh this week. Yeah, because otherwise you're not playing the real game. How do we capture that in a bottle? That's the factor I think is missing.
I think that's also what a lot of people want, and it's a little bit of both of what you said, because at the same time, like Garrett was saying, how, you know, there's this hype, and there's like overall, I have so many thoughts at once about this whole entire thing, but basically, like, it was the peak of HGC was like, it was a peak. It was a very, very high moment for all of it. But what ended up happening is Killing It basically took the majority of the audience and just was like, all right, well, I'm going to go find an esport that I can watch and it's not going to go away, which is the blunt of it all. Is like, so a lot of people and a lot of my friends I know, they all just were like, all right, cool, I'm back to League. Like, that's it. I'm back to Dota. I'm doing whatever MOBA it is. Like, there was a couple other MOBAs that came out right around after that, and they all were like, well, we're just going to jump on this new thing. Like Arena of Valor actually came out just around that same time. So it was, a lot of people were going onto that as well. It was just, and we had all of that fun, and people want to bring that back, but I think we're mostly in the Warcraft 3 stages at this point. We don't have a pro scene. This is going to be community driven, and we may never hit that level of hype again, but we can at least take that like passion that we have, that level of hype that we want, and we can still put that back into the grassroots instead of saying dead game, it's gone, no scene, I'm out of here. Because that's the biggest hindrance to all of it, is that we don't have any sort of community manager, we don't have any sort of community growth, and so no one's really being pulled in, because we're not putting it out there. Like, there's no hey, come watch Caldor, come watch Bahamut on the Blizzard launcher and watch esports. It's just whatever's on Reddit, whatever's on Twitter, whatever people can find by word of mouth, or me spamming 16 different Discords when I go live. Like, we have to kind of put that information out there, and hopefully we can build it to that point where, you know, it's like Warcraft 3, where there's a resurgence and people are like, man, I miss this game. Like, I miss playing that. I miss having more than one map to play on, or, playing against one busted hero, that kind of thing. And it's hard to ever bring that back. But I think realistically, all we have to do is just keep enjoying the game that we enjoy, and not letting the fact that, they killed it, but not letting that be the factor of just like, well, it's gone just because, they killed the pro scene and, they took away assets that we had beforehand.
So your counter petition would be the Blizzard launcher. Do you think that's the best avenue for success?
At this point, the best way to start bringing back and starting to get people motivated to start playing the game and watching the game a little bit more is exactly that. Like, could you imagine, because there's roughly 1,000 people that watch Fan every night. Could you imagine loading up your Blizz launcher and seeing that and knowing, because I see people in Twitch chat all the time. They're just like, well, I stopped watching, I stopped playing because, it's gone. But people know Fan's name. And if you open up your Blizz launcher and you go through heroes and you happen to see Fan stream, you're like, oh, I remember them from Tempo Storm. Let me go over to their stream. So it's the same kind of thing. Like, I had friends who would average like 20 viewers when they just streamed, and then they got pulled into the Blizz launcher, and then they got partnered, and then they blew up from there. So it's one of those things that, like, I think building the community is the biggest factor right now. I don't think we should be focusing on trying to petition back the HGC. I think we should focus on what's here and regrowing from what's here, I think, is the best way for me to kind of bring that all together.
Yeah, I completely agree. I mean, we've been talking about it for a while now, and there was a pretty big emphasis on it on this show in the months following HGC's cancellation, and also that terrifying Brack letter that made it seem like Heroes of the Storm itself was like going away, even though that was not the case at all. It was just a horribly written letter. We talked a lot about on the show, and it comes up every now and then, that's just like, well, we're still here and y'all are still here listening to this show, writing in, playing this game, doing game nights, all this stuff, because we refuse to let it die. And also the devs refuse to let it die. Like, this game is still updated at a rate that confuses me, because I play other Blizzard games too. And it's just like, I look at Overwatch like, really, this is all you've got for updates? Like, compared to Heroes of the Storm, it's insane to me. Because of the quote unquote hype around something like Overwatch compared to Heroes of the Storm. I'm just like, man, I don't really play Overwatch anymore because I'm just bored with it.
This game Triple Damage is out, which then I saw a Reddit post saying Triple Damage is awful. So
yeah, I don't mean to dive.
No. I'm saying, like, it's one of those things too that, like, I actually had a friend make a joke. He was just like, "Are they still patching Heroes of the Storm?" I was just like, "Dude, they do like a solid major patch every month." And he's like, "Really?" And I sent him the link for the last one. He's like, "Holy crap, it's a big thick boy." I was like, "Exactly, like, it's a big patch." Like, they are, while you know, things have slowed down, I'm okay with that personally. Even if, like, let's back things up. Let's rewind for a year and imagine if we're here now, but HEC is still around and all that, but we're getting 4 heroes a year roughly, and we're getting a patch every month. I'm still cool with that, because I think in its infancy, Heroes of the Storm needed to have all of those, you know, monthly heroes, constant patches, because we had monthly heroes and the meta was constantly changing. Whereas now we slowed things down, and I think just looking at things over long periods of times really have given the devs opportunities to make significant and well-tuned adjustments to heroes. It's not like we're not making an adjustment to Zarya and then a day later we have to make another adjustment to Zarya, and then another day later we have to make another adjustment to Zarya, because she's just, you know, it's like overbalanced, too balanced, underbalanced. So it's one of those things where I like where things sit right now. And if people see that pacing as like it's dead, or there's no, you know, developers working on the game anymore, I disagree with both of you. I mean, hell, I talked Kyle Dates' ear off at BlizzCon. He's just like, dude, I can log in and see how many people are playing. He's like, the game's doing fine. Like, it's just, there's a mentality because of what happened that it's dead game.
Yeah. We've talked that to hell and back on the show. And so it's like, I don't think anyone listening that's ever listened to one other episode is surprised to hear us say, like, it's not going anywhere, and it's because we're not letting it go anywhere. We're still playing it because we still enjoy the game, and the game is still updated frequently. So I don't know. I just don't know why we can't carry that mentality over to the grassroots esports side of things as well. It's just like, it's not gone if you don't let it be gone. You can go watch these leagues right now.
There's also a little bit of a hard factor too, because like if you look at things like Caldor, like that man will pull in tons and tons and tons of viewers, because bluntly also Europe has a bigger following of Heroes of the Storm, and he's also a ex-professional caster. If you look at North America, we have Trixler. Trixler's a variety streamer, but he also plays Heroes of the Storm, but he's not casting anymore. The only casting he did was during CCL on his own channel. You have Jayhow, who's just playing Heroes of the Storm, making videos and explaining things, and he's just teaching through his playing. So you have, you know, Europe, like everyone's just like, Europe is, you know, the best, blah, 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 blah. But I think North America has this hindrance because there's no ex-pro caster that's like pulling in everybody, and everyone just goes to the ex-pro gamers. So like I'll end stream and I'll look over, and it's fan pulling in 1,000. So it's like, well, like why can't we also just like share these numbers? Like why can't why can't I pull fan in and potentially be like, do you want to come cast with me? Like, let's talk about Here's the Storm. Like, let's make this more of a community thing. But also I think everyone kind of stays in their lane. Like they want to do their thing, and then also kind of splits all of us into, well, doing our own thing. I'm the same way. Like I do a lot of solo casting, and it's the exact same thing. I don't pull a lot of people in just because we all kind of have our own regiment, we have our own style, and we just do our own thing. And that's also, I think, part of it is just trying to also bring it all together. CCL was a great way to pull everything together. You had players streaming their perspective. You had Heroes Hearth actually having casters doing play-by-play. So you could go and you could see what the players are doing, and you could go and see what the casters are doing. And I think that is one of the best things that's ever happened in Heroes of the Storm in a long while for the community is just kind of having everyone's benefiting, and everyone is getting exposure, viewership, and people are cheering them on. And it's also expanding into different fields. Like every night for CCL, it seemed like the viewership was gaining. We had new people in chat. There were people who came into the final one and they were just like, I didn't even know this was happening, but I'm glad I caught the grand finals kind of thing. So the biggest thing, and I keep, circling back to this, is just build on the community, like work with each other and find a way that we can all just have Heroes of the Storm grow from this. Because if we all just split ourselves and do our own thing, this is just going to be we're going to stagnate. That's it. We're just going to go in a straight line.
Well said. Well, and we've got links to a lot of what we talked about, every league we talked about in the show notes today, and anything we're missing, we'll drop it in. So if you're not sure where to go, but like you said, there's a sticky on Reddit every week.
Yep.
So it's not very difficult to go and find. Rad. Well, thanks for hanging out for the top of the show, which ended up being 40 minutes. We'll just continue on with the rest of the show and get your thoughts on how the balance is shaking out and whatnot. Before we get into this week's kind of news and we check in on balance and whatnot, we want to thank those of you supporting us over at patreon.com/ITN, because we really appreciate it. And because of you, we get to spend time going and finding guests and contacting people like Bahamut and being like, hey, you should come on. So thank you for that, everybody. And if you like the show, you want to support it, patreon.com/ITN is the place to go. To some of our more recent patrons, we thank you in the order that you signed up. Thank you to Bjorn Hoffman, Dodgen, and the Crimson Chin.
All right.
It's just a great name. Just a fantastic name. Thank you very much for the support. Go check out the Patreon, get all kinds of perks, access to the Discord, an ad-free feed, sign-ups for our patron games, which we're doing tonight. We do them every month. So go check it out. But in the meantime, let's get into this week's Heroes of the Storm news.
We're on, boys! Ha ha! Let's liven up this place!
Point me to the stage.
Stay a while and listen.
All right, so we've had 2 weeks now with the last balance patch. Kyle, how have things been shaken out?
In interesting ways. Let's talk about what happened stat-wise first. And then we'll get into the real winners who, in this case, weren't really touched at all. But, we got Muradin unchanged. People were discussing him getting armor, and it's bad for Muradins to engage or be thinking that they shouldn't be engaging with that. However, Muradin is doing just fine. If anything, his popularity is up.
I have been seeing quite a bit of Muradin in my personal experience.
Bahamut, where does Muradin belong?
I don't see him that much, but I actually wanted to talk, if we don't mind, I wanted to kind of talk about this block talent really quickly, because I think it's actually great, because a lot of Muradins would just hold Dwarf Toss just to get out of the engagement. They rarely use it as an engagement tool. Maybe they take a heavy impact and that's when it becomes an engagement tool, but heavy impact never had some like extra oomph to it. And that dwarf block, I think, is perfect with the heavy impact as well. So you can constantly be just diving in. And at that point, he actually works well as a dive-based hero. You can grab a Greymane with him and you can, Muradin dives in, Stormbolt to the face, Greymane shreds through them. And so he works well as a initiator main tank that can actually play as a dive tank now.
How dare you? A talent that is encouraging people to engage wrong. I've been curious about this for a little bit, because we have these really heavy extremes on things like Muradin and Anub'arak, basically holdovers from HGC. Mm-hmm. But Blaze also stands to these rules but doesn't receive them. And everyone is wondering why Blaze isn't constantly engaging. How do we fix this? Is there something wrong with Blaze? Is there something right with Muradin and Anub'arak?
I think I think the big thing with Blaze is that he's expected to use the Jet Propulsion as an engage tool because of the fact that it has an AoE stun. And so as long as you're landing that AoE stun, that allows the rest of your team to then capitalize and collapse on the enemy team. Muradin, the whole thing with Muradin is you're a single target. So if you're dwarf tossing, you better get that Stormbolt and you better lock them down so that someone can come in. If you miss that Stormbolt, you're kind of on an island by yourself looking around like, I hope my friend saves me. So like, I think the block talent, which I haven't seen anyone taking this, but the way that I was reading through the patch notes, I was like, oh, like you can play him Blaze-ish, but it's still single target. It's weird. Like no one's really taken Dwarf Block either. I think it's still Perfect Storm or Third Wind at level 1. I don't think I've seen anyone taking Dwarf Block whatsoever. And Heavy Impact, it's here and there. Like maybe we'll see everyone, like Infernal Shrines, they'll jump over the wall and start, going on the shrine, and they'll have the friendly team rotate in as well. But that's far and few between. So I think they want him to kind of play in that single target dive like Blaze, but without having sort of any AoE stun or AoE control, he really starts to fall off. And then so it's just like, well, why don't I just drive Blaze instead?
Does he need someone else? It feels like Muradins are 100% in the gonna get him territory and leap over the front line into the back and, you know, maybe secure that Hanzo or Li Ming. What should be behind him in a good draft? Who is now the main tank because Muradin just went away.
Like, I don't hate the idea, but this is just me personally. I don't hate the idea of a Sonya. Let's say in this instance, they go into dwarf toss, and they have their dwarf toss, they dive in, they go haymaker, the white main into the friendly front line. You need a way to lock her down. So Blaze typically pops up here. If let's say Blaze is banned out, Sonya's not a bad idea. If you have someone who could land a skill shot, you go ahead and you throw that spear into them, and Sonya also has her own survivability while Muradin's still working their way back. She can spin to win, and that starts to kind of create a little bit of chaos. I like those two together a lot. Also, you can go into Leap, and I'm a big proponent of Leap because I think it's just a fun talent. But Wrath of Berserker is still fine as well. So there's options, but you need something that can also take that engagement that you're creating and keep it going. So like Mal'Ganis might be an option as well for you to grab. He pops up quite often, and he could be using that in that scenario. Leoric isn't bad either. Maybe you get that Haymaker, and Leoric then just sets up an Entomb, and they can't go anywhere.
But Bahamut,
so in this
Garrosh that kept tossing the Muradin into our team told me to never play Sonya in 2020 when we lost that game.
Wait. Go back. What
very
happened?
Personal. A very personal anecdote.
Hold on. Yeah, I'm trying to wrap my brain around this. What happened again?
The Garrosh who kept tossing the Muradin into our team told me, Sonya, that I should not play this hero in 2020 when we lost that game.
Okay, all right. Sorry, I was thinking it. I thought Garrosh was doing like poor man's leap, where you take into the fray and throw your Sonya. Okay.
I would have been really on board with that, for the record.
That's what I thought it was. In those situations, you just leave your Garrosh to die. if your Garrosh if your Garrosh steps forward, like once or twice, I get it. Like sometimes the reticle redirects into a new hero, you throw the wrong one. It happens. I've seen Johannes being thrown all the time. It's like, that's not a target. You're not going to kill it, whatever. But if that happens constant over and over again, just like, call me toxic, I don't care. Just walk away from them. You're not solidifying that kill. They're trolling. They're doing whatever. Like, it's not going to work out. Like, oh man, I feel your pain just from that story already.
This has been the worst week of games I've had this year so far. It's
Dear
been a rough
Lord.
one. This is my personal bag of salt that I brought to the show with me today.
Is it spring break still?
I hope you enjoyed it.
No, it's in those situations, I really don't know. Like, if you had a gravity, like if you had a Kael'thas, then maybe like throwing a gravity lapse out so that way you can get away or blow them up. I don't know.
Funny you should mention that. The next game, I got the same Garrosh on my team, and I was Kael'thas, and it did not go well.
Oh boy,
that was on me though. My Kael'thas is a little unpracticed at the moment. I'll
be honest. Mages, in my opinion, are one of the hardest things out there. But
I don't expect you to have an answer. That was mostly just an anecdotal joke.
No, I was trying to figure it out. I was like, how can we solve this? Yeah, no, there's options in that situation, but yeah, no, I get it.
There were lots of other balance adjustments. Stitches did benefit from his balance. Tyrael benefited from exploding and getting a cooldown. Zarya did get buffed or retooled a little bit, actually went down. Those sort of heroes always seem to make sense because, hey, it's a weird hero. You changed it. People said, oh, I remember that. I'm going to play that, and they lose. The real interesting surprise winner in terms of buffs over Raynor, in fact, was Malfurion, who went up 3%, became healer number 2 under Rhaegar this week.
I have actually seen a lot more Malfurion as of late.
Dude, Kyle and I ended up in a game late last week, and I can't remember the last time I saw Malfurion, and this Malfurion just like, I feel like, I don't know, this is like the dude down the street with the most beautiful classic muscle car in the garage, and they have you've lived there 4 years, and they just took it out, and they do some kind of sick, like, J-turn to leave the neighborhood, and you're like, wow, they did not forget how that thing works. And that was this Malfurion with their roots in this game, because we're like, holy crap, I forgot how terrifying a Malfurion that's really good at hiding and landing their roots is.
I mean, I saw Malfurion last night. Maybe roots were buffed and they just didn't note it or something. Because I saw Malfurion last night cast roots on a Hanzo as they were trying to get the agility over a wall, and it was the funniest animation to me because it was Hanzo going "Yep," and then it was just the root saying "Nope," and then they died.
Yeah, exactly.
Like I was just like, "Oh wait, what a minute." Yeah, so Malfurion popping up a lot more lately. I don't know if it was just the changes on Q or what, but yeah, he's had a lot more presence lately. I've seen.
Listen,
I mean, honestly,
as someone who is playing one of the only heroes that has mana issues left in this game, named DTC right now, I am all for Malfurion ended up in my comps again.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I mean, he's really benefited, I feel, from the clear interaction with his new Q level 1. The regen on yourself is ticking, and that's one less regen you felt you had to cast on yourself because you had no idea what increased regeneration meant when it wasn't giving you little tiny numbers. And because of that, my own Malfurion is benefiting as a visual tracker. I'm not looking at the corner and saying, oh, I have 3 leaves active. I'm looking at my own health, seeing 22s, 22, 22, and going, yes, I am healing other people. And we basically got a better tracker through a level 1 talent.
In some situations, that's all you need. Like if you have the tools to actually understand how your character's working better, sometimes you're going to play that character better. And I think this is a good example of exactly that.
It's why I'm still complimenting the XP orbs, because I've seen them. Yeah. I've heard from a lot of people who are like, oh, they just undid it. What was the point of this in the first place? I'm like, no, it's now you can get XP without being in lane. You can actually report after they crash into a wall if you get there fast enough and get the XP. That is something we couldn't do before. And B, even if that wasn't the case, I just like the fact that it is a visual now that you're getting your XP. I think it's fantastic.
Fun fact, because I was playing yesterday in Brawls, Zagara, level 1, I don't know off the top of Viatal Banelings, I think it is. I can't remember. It's the Baneling upgrade at level 1 where you get the increased range on it. The range to get an experience globe is, I believe, a 7 in the game. So that's roughly like Zul'jin's auto when they finish both of the quests and talents. Anyways, you can use, as long as you last hit the minion, you get the experience. And so if you actually throw those from a distance as Zagara, you will get the experience. You don't have to be in lane to collect them. So it's the same thing like Asmodan. Like for a while when the experience globes came through, Asmodan was considered not good because of the fact that if you threw a dunk and got the last hit on them, you wouldn't get the experience. You still had to physically get it. Then they made that adjustment. And I think that was the perfect dial-in for the experience globes, because being able to throw something from one lane, get the experience, like Ragnaros, for example, Lava Wave, and still being in another lane and getting that experience is insanely important. And also in a casting format and a teaching format, you can then say, like, look, like you can visually see how much experience they're losing because you can see all the globes on the ground. Before it was just like minions dying. It's like, whatever, I don't understand why I'm losing experience. Now you actually like, I'm not getting the little globes and I understand why we're falling behind in experience. And I think in the lower divisions of games, if we're just hopping back onto casting for a second, that's what people struggle with as well, is just getting the experience. And when they fall behind, not prioritizing getting it.
Yeah. Visuals like this, like what's going on with Malfurion. Yeah. Great stuff.
I love this. I hope they do more of this kind of stuff.
Yeah. Hell, you're on Malfurion. You're probably like World of Warcraft. You know what we love seeing in World of Warcraft? Numbers over our heads.
Add those crit kickers when you have more than one going, and that'll just be sold. I mean, Malfurion suffers to, in my opinion, one hero, and that's Kael'thas, because Pyroblast. You can't do a darn thing about it. Otherwise, he's really, really good. And with Ariel down 7%, Malfurion might be the new king of supports right under Rhaegar.
How much do we think Ariel being down this much is because of the nerf, and how much do we think it's because no one has any Ariel practice after basically a month of her being panned out?
That is likely true, and double that factor because of her flat damage decrease. Those who finally got Ariel this last week tried to do some 1v1 and doing some, auto attacks, energized cord, and got no hope for it in terms of what they were expecting. The res thing didn't really matter. It's that flat base kit that hit her so hard.
Mm-hmm. Just sacred sweep reduction, yeah.
Yeah. That's lane clear. We're always talking about lane clear and how often yeah. That's a lot of hope that you're missing out on now. And some of our other ones are Raynor. Raynor did go up 2% with his sweet buffs, is now heading towards the top, but he's under Phoenix. Phoenix actually benefiting a whole 3% from a little bit of retooling on some off-pick talents, or, easier talents maybe. Inhibiting energy, slowing all the time is certainly a factor.
I honestly, I don't see a lot of Phoenix in my games and in casting. Like he, for some reason, just isn't around. I don't know what it is. If it's the fact that his heroic, I don't know about you, but does Purification Salvo feel very weak to you, even with a slow applied to people? Because whenever I'm casting it, it doesn't feel like it's got that oomph that like a lot of other heroics have. It kind of just feels like it's an ability that has a very, very long cooldown.
It's an interesting thought. For me, it really depends on the slow. And I do feel that when someone is slow, particularly if we're dealing with that like Hanzo Li Ming kind of backline. I know when I was on a heavy rail kick, being able to cleanse that off somebody meant they survived when they would have otherwise died. Maybe it's a gambler's sort of thing. The do scan into the firing thing makes everyone go, ooh, how's it gonna go down? Like, what random minion am I gonna get in my Hearthstone card? Like, it's something about that death rattle sort of business.
Okay.
Whereas Planet Cracker is just it does great. Planet Cracker is amazing, but we do see a higher popularity, 73% on Salvo.
Ooh.
Yeah. I mean, when you look at stats websites, Phoenix isn't like top of games played. It's not like he's running away with the popularity. He's also not one of the most underplayed. He's like right in the middle of the pack. I love that Phoenix is coming up again. I don't know if you heard last week's episode, Bahamut, but Kyle and I were both like, yeah, we don't see Phoenix that often, but when we do, we're terrified of him because there's just those Phoenix players out there that are just very good with the hero. And because I don't see him that often, I totally get stumped when I have to play against him.
The crazy thing to me is the Rainer buffs. I'm not going to lie. Like, I was confused by those. I don't know about you two.
I want him to work, so I encourage it.
Because I thought he was actually in a really good spot beforehand, and this just made him even more prioritized. Like, I think he's in 75 to 90% of the games that I'm casting or playing.
I mean, we got a blue post this week saying that they very much look at stats, but it's not just stats that they. I mean, it wasn't, and this wasn't specific to Rainer. This was just folks asking, "Hey, how much do stats play a role?" And we got a really detailed explanation. And so, it's one of those things where I have to imagine that they were looking at things internally. But I don't know what, because they didn't get specific into the Rainer changes. But yeah, I'm with you. It was kind of this, oh, well, Rainer was fine. I don't think we necessarily needed to do this, but okay, I'm not going to complain. My damage numbers are looking very nice on Rainer at the moment.
And here's the thing, the really quick note on this, I come from casting, so this is 5v5 constantly, whereas the stats they might be looking at, this might be Storm League quick match unranked. So there it might be a little different, whereas in competitive, I mean, Rainer, before even the changes with that man, I mean, you get Rainer on Battlefield of Eternity, and you would expect Exterminator every single time. And now it got a 25% buff. It's like, pff, okay, all right.
Yeah, it makes it's an odd one, but again, I'm not unhappy about it.
I'm excited to see where it goes,
especially since they dinged the door of my Uther.
Oh. Yeah, Uther
bums me out. He's fallen. Still above the 50% win rate on our stat sites out there, but definitely falling down from one of the highest and sometimes the highest win rate in the game.
You know, I'm to go back a hot moment. I'm experimenting with something we just saw in the chat. It appears that Phoenix is bugged and he is at 111% movement speed at all times right now.
Yeah, he's banned in every single league.
Oh,
yeah, he's booking it.
This. Well,
level 1 too. As it's apparently the word is that it's a bugged level 4 talent, but it's working all levels starting at 0.
Wild. Okay, well, things happen.
There we go.
Yeah.
Yep. We're going to see a lot of Phoenix now.
Yep.
Yep. And now it's out into the world on this show to anyone who listens to this show and didn't already know about it. So.
Well, yeah. I mean, it's not like we're saying, hey, everybody, go play bugged. I don't know. What's the easiest hero in the game? What, Lily? Maybe Lily. Like, oh, Lily's destroying it. Like, you're basically saying, Gary, help me out here, right? Like a really hard to run car. What's it called?
Anything with a rotary. Throw a dart at a Mazda.
Mazda RX-7. Machine. Perfect.
Yeah, you want to go. Yeah, it turns out Mazda RX-7, best car to win races right now. Unfortunately, the engine explodes every 3 miles. So good luck.
There we go. There we go. That's a perfect analogy because my engine does explode every 3 miles with Phoenix. He is really hard to learn in quick match. The shield feels like nothing without organized play around you. And I just can't master this guy.
My Phoenix is one of those cars that you have to like actually turn in the front to get going in the first place, and it just stalls before it leaves the garage. I'm a very poor Phoenix player. You do not want me on that hero.
There were, of course, lots of other balance changes that happened, moved some people around. Abathur is up, but that's because he was nerfed last week, but that was previous buffs kind of taking their toll, continuing to climb back in. Cho'Gall is down 9%, but as always, those 7 people, even number 8 people, had a really rough week, and he'll probably just go back up again. The untold winners of this patch are ETC and Gazlo. And I want to take a moment here. You mentioned at the top, Bahamut, ETC is wild right now. He is first pick potential. Johanna's getting banned still on certain maps. Mal'Ganis is weak to ETC. Still a early request, but Mal'Ganis just has so many counter picks that I really do not want to take him early. ETC is king right now of tanks.
It's like 50-50 because like even then, like you talk about counters into Mal'Ganis, like I see Mal'Ganis as like run it down. Now, granted, I mean maybe I'm just thinking back to Leon Black's Mal'Ganis from CCL, but like there are some Mal'Ganises out there that it feels like they're uncounterable. But ETC, there's a lot of maps that people are going to, Infernal Shrines, Battlefield of Eternity, Tomb of Spider Queen, where in Volskaya Foundry as well, where you're going to be fighting on these control points or near a turn-in, and ETC's disruption is so insanely powerful. And if you can angle things just right, Face Melt is just a setup for a kill every single time. And that's the big thing. Like I saw crowd surfing ETC last night. I have not seen crowd surfer in I think a solid 6 months, but it's a talent that you can pick up, and it's a talent where you can slide through basically walls and capitalize on kills, which exactly was the factor that happened. So he's got a lot of things, and I think, as you said it, he's he's not in this balance patch, but I think he's still a giant winner here. But Gazlo, now what's this on Gazlo? I want to hear about this.
Now Gazlo is up 4% this week, and as we've been shifting around our solo lane, and Gazlo also has a number of very tricky things he can do with 2 spawn turrets that take out wells by themselves. He is sneaking up and quite powerful in that regard. We talked about siege damage too, a lack of it. And if you can pack that much siege damage into your solo lane and call on it later, I mean, who else can really do that? You're not going to run solo lane Nazebo, solo lane Sylvanas.
No.
We talked a little bit about Rexar. Maybe he can do it, but he's got other weaknesses. Gazlo, I think, is number 1 solo right now, and the stats are starting to support it.
I could see that starting to form. I definitely could. When it comes to Dragonstar, I honest to God feel like it's just Rexar. Like Rexar, I feel like dominates that late unless they're matched into a Kira, because Kira seems to be countering Rexar consistently on Dragonstar when I have that happen, which is a really... sorry, go ahead.
I had a terrible game a few weeks ago against the GM Chen on my Rexar, and just ruined my day on Dragonshire.
Do you remember it was like 6 months ago? It was like the first time Chen got touched in years, it felt like. And at that point, maybe it was even longer, at that point, like Chen was like starting to be played in top lane on Dragonshire. I was like, ooh, he's got a niche level. And now we actually see Chen prioritized almost on every single map, which is just wild to me.
I'm glad you brought up Kira though, because that's another one. I've been seeing a lot of Kira, more so this week, but I saw her starting to come back last week. Hell, even like when I'm going into quick match, I saw double Kira for the first time in quick match today. I'm like, okay,
interesting.
I think people are trying to practice her up again. There's just something going on with Kira, but you're right. As a self-proclaimed Rexar one trick, it's rough. It's rough out there against those Kiras.
Well, Kira is taking on a new responsibility that Greymane, I'd maybe even go as far to say like Malthael was taking up.
Yeah.
When you have that in the solo lane, we're constantly thinking, can we get this guy to camp? And Kira can't go camp, so she sort of just owns it. Like I see this a lot when we get Smurfs on the team too in Storm League, and it's let me body that top lane, and they think they're going to be all safe and sound with their Sonya, and Kira just goes in there and ruins the day.
the bleed stacks. Just the bleed stacks will get you. I think people don't really know how to play against it or don't respect the stacks that she can apply to you. Also, grapple and revolving sweep, insane distance closer.
Yeah, it's and the surprise healing. You know, the self healing that Kira possesses as well makes her like a trap target.
Exactly.
It just feels like you're going to get the kill, and you're not, and you're going to die as a result. And it's something I've been having to remind myself of. I've like finally felt like I got a handle again on like that gut feeling on when you can go in and kill like a Thrall, because it was like open season on Thrall. Everyone was playing Thrall, and I'm like, oh yeah, he's got that damn self healing, but he's not a Sonya. I play enough Sonya that I've got a good feeling for that. But so I was getting back into the vibe of fighting Thralls and knowing when to actually commit to get the kill on him. And then now, great. Well, now here's Kira. She works different. It's much more spiky in the way that self healing takes place. And oh yeah, I definitely overcommitted on multiple what I thought were Kira kills this week, and it just went so south so quickly.
The one thing I saw teams doing was just picking a cleanse against her. So anytime she tries to go for the evolving sweep, you wait for her to actually swing to the farthest side away from her team, cleanse the target, she drops down, capitalize on killing her. I've actually seen Dahaka's doing that too. They're purposely getting caught by the revolving sweep. They wait till she's actually swinging towards their gate. They go for the burrow. They pop back out, tongue drag and pull them into the gate and get the kill.
Nice. That'd be sick.
So it's ways like that's the counterplay that I've understood at least best for Kira, because her best trait is the revolving sweep, is cleansing the target or getting her off of them in an awkward position. And that seems to be the best way to just shut her down consistently.
Yeah. Well, maybe I'll take Uther out for another spin then. That sounds fun.
There you go.
That sounds fun. Oh, cool. Well, we got all these notes again in the show notes if you want to kind of brush up on the buffs, the nerfs, where people landed, who the winners and the losers are. But let's get into blue posts from this week, as we're getting a little long in the show here, when there were actually some really interesting blue posts. The first off was on the subject of something that comes up actually surprisingly often in the community and hell, even on the show, which is on the subject of a core replacement hero. Kyle, you and I have talked about wanting an old god forever. That would be out of the game and just replace the core. And the developer Jeff B responded to it and kind of talked about all of the trials, tribulations, and challenges that would come with even designing one of these in the first place. And the first thing that Jeff B kind of brings up is, well, if you've got heroes like Cho'Gall, Abathur, and then you added a core replacement hero, like that's a big challenge, because you can basically just really screw yourself in the draft in terms of just bodies on the battleground, which I guess I haven't really thought of when we've been daydreaming about just what a core replacement hero would even look like. And granted, that would also be kind of on you at a certain point if you did draft that way. But I could see where if I was the maker of the game, I'm not sure I would want to leave that trap out there for players to fall into.
Yeah, I really liked the reference to a Magic the Gathering article here, which basically highlighted some of the rules, a lot like the, Pixar tells a good story kind of rules that you may have seen in the past. And basically that whatever is fun should be the correct strategy. So if we put heroes that all seem very fun to stack and it's bad, well, then we've done the community a disservice.
It makes a lot of sense, right? It goes into the kind of psychology of fun that is, a part in game design. So I get that, but I mean, you could make it so that it's not fun to stack Cho'Gall, Abathur and your core replacement hero in the same damn game. But yeah.
That's a hard one. That's definitely when they were designing Ragnaros and they came out and they said exactly how, they fiddled with him being able to be the core and then moving the core up the map. They were just like, yeah, we tried this and we realized this is a bad idea. So I'm sure there's people out there, like I know who are probably in chat who would die for Overmind to be in this game. And, that's a core replacement here in a sense, but how do you make that different from Abathur, and how do you make them impactful outside of, team fights and stuff like that? Because you're still going to be 4v5 constantly.
Right. They even mentioned that they tried a world where Ragnaros had his, Major Domo? that would go out, who's like a
I think so. Yeah.
D&D salamander sort of thing. Like that thing is hideous no matter where you get at it. That is not a cool classic 80s design painted on a van with a wizard. But then you're just making another Murky at some point.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Well, Overmind, you just fix that because all of the waves that spawn are Zerg, and you just get to play StarCraft. You can box select and control the creeps.
Oh, I mean, it's such a cool idea, right? Like, even if they were tethered, but you could run the lane into the infernal shrines. Like, just what a neat idea! I also
each lane has a radius. Each lane can extend into its adjacent jungle.
Dude, I played this game, Natural Selection, for I loved it. But it's butt. It's butt. You have basically the Zerg on one side, Terran on the other, and then one person gets to play all the NPCs on each side, play as the core building, and everyone else runs around basically playing Overwatch is probably the closest thing to modern time. And you just wanted to be the one guy, and you'd quit. Everyone would quit all the games where they didn't get to be the one guy who got to do the cool thing.
Isn't that how, jumping randomly, isn't that how like Battlefront is? Like, aren't a lot of people like they want to play Darth Vader, but you typically just get like a generic character or something like that?
I don't know the modes, but the standard mode, you have to like get a kill streak to unlock playing one of the heroes.
That's yeah. But I think it's that same kind of thing. Like everyone wanted to play the one hero, and then turns out it's just you can't do it every single time. So it's like, well,
yeah. It's an interesting thought for sure. Moving down the blue post from this week, though, someone asked how big is the Heroes dev team, and Daybringer got it and said there are literally dozens of us, which, as an Arrested Development fan, made me very happy.
The rest of it was all theory by the community. A couple of devs jumped in and out of here. Basically, they said that we're not all active in the community. We read a lot of your stuff that you post, but not everybody is taking it upon themselves to respond or be active. And they seem to have pretty good representation on the Reddit from all the different departments.
Yeah. And I wouldn't expect that, and I don't necessarily think I want that. I mean, not everyone is built for that, and hell, I don't even think I am, and I do a podcast publicly because like there's a lot of anxiety that comes with being very active on the internet, and sure as hell being active on Reddit. And so, yeah, I don't. It's something I feel the devs are pretty good about reminding us of. Like anytime a high profile developer either moves to a different team or leaves Blizzard, there's always a post about it, and almost always a dev gets in there and it's just like, hey, just a reminder, there are so many people on this team that you're like not even aware of that have been, that are rock stars in their own right. And that's a really, I think, easy thing to forget or kind of like, not see the forest for the trees type of thing. But I'd like that, Daybringer chimed in here. And then kind of the meatiest damn response we got in here was, as I alluded to earlier, was a conversation that was going on about how internal data is used for balance patches in Heroes of the Storm. And the developer, AZ Jackson, chimed in. And by the way, we can announce that AZ Jackson will be joining us on next week's show. Which is freaking awesome. Thank you for running that down, Kyle.
Absolutely. Nice it was surprisingly easy. Let me tell you. I mean, I'd love to brag, but he is eager to come on, and I wonder what that means for the show, honestly, because he might be like, yeah, you guys are great, but hold up here, because you've been wrong, and we're just going to get schooled. I look forward to it.
I think it's just going to turn into another one of these, like, you actually had secret fans, like all the developers, watch and listen to the podcast. So it's just going to be one of those where he's just going to fangirl out the entire time.
Well, then it's both, because I love, nothing makes me happier is when I get to talk to devs and they're like, hey, this one very specific thing you mentioned on a show, boy, you were so full of it. You have no idea. But I love the show. I love getting called out and then also wanting to do the podcast thing. So, so back to how internal data is used for balance patches. I'm going to pick and choose here. I'm not going to read the entire thing. It's actually quite long, and I cannot recommend it enough. It's a fascinating read. But Jackson said, I'm not going to give away everything, but said, quote, we get raw data on basically everything that's happening in the game across all modes based on win and pick rate, as well as things like damage dealt, taken, etc. And then went on to say that they are able to parse through that data and look at it through many different lenses, and that this is where raw statistics become less useful and the skill and experience of a designer come into play more, so that they can draw meaningful conclusions from the data and decide on what kind of changes they want to make based on the results. And Jackson's also pretty, it feels like self-aware here with how kind of odd and nebulous that sounds and how it's not a perfect science. And one of my favorite things that comes out of this is that, whatever they're talking about, he says, quote, that there are often multiple right and wrong answers, which I think is a really important thing to keep in the back of your mind. And when we're here as a community kind of talking about, we need this change. This change would fix everything. When in reality, it's like, well, maybe that change, maybe another change, maybe a change we're not thinking about could also fix it.
Could you do me a favor next week?
Oh, okay. All right.
Could you ask them? This is just off from what we were talking about earlier. Could you ask them? And they might not even answer this. Do they pull stats from the custom games? Because they said all game modes, but I'm wondering, do they actually have stats from all of these like Grassroot League kind of things? Like, do they actually see? Because I'm sure that they watch here and there, but do they actually pull data from that? Does it actually go into their systems? That's the one outlier that I've always been wondering about. Like,
I know exactly who to ask this question. I will get this moved on. I will definitely ask this to the right person.
Thank you.
I'm excited about
I'm
this.
just really, really curious about that answer.
Yeah, I bet they could give a yes or a no on that. They're not going to tell you the stats, but
yeah. No, I don't want to know the stats. I'm just curious if they're actually pulling from that, because as casting leagues and stuff, like, does that go into our balance patches, or is it just what's in Storm League and unranked and quick match?
When you select match history or game privacy and you say no match history, that's the one they giggle about the most. They're just sitting around watching all your secret matches, knowing exactly what you're up to, and they're like, hey, check these guys out.
I'll tell you this, every single team wants no match history. Every single team.
Nerf them. Nerf these guys.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, that's the answer we're never going to get. Well, there was this one game last week in a community tournament, and this Genji just went off, and that was the only reason we nerfed Genji this week. We're sorry. It's your fault, Chad.
Well, I was honest to God waiting for them to nerf Urel so we can make jokes about Liam getting target nerfed by Blizzard, but that never really happened.
Well, they did fix the bug on Urel instead of making it a feature, which is what they did with Whitemane's bug, and I was hoping they would do that with Urel, but they didn't.
So kind of they did nerf Liam a little bit. Okay.
Yeah. Do you think that, while we're on the subject, do you think that was enough? And I'm sorry, I have to jump in with my own personal opinion. I'm so happy to be in a world where, like, oh my goodness, like bug exploits and play exploits are immediately in the public, because there's nothing more frustrating than HGC times when you're sitting around and everyone's like, dude, do you know about the, and oh yeah, my team knows about the,
It was so very hush hush at the time. I love it because the way that at least it's reported within community leagues, like there's a patch that'll come through, and I'd say a day or two later, there's one of the leagues, if not both, posting, hey, this year's bugged, it's banned out, you can't play it. Last night I think it was last night or a couple nights ago, one of the games was being created, someone drafted Phoenix, they killed the draft and they redid draft because they were expecting to grab Phoenix, not realizing it's banned out by the league. So I think living in a world where we find the bugs, we point them out, and at least in my realm, it's great. Maybe in the people in Storm League and stuff where it's out in the public where they're like, I know how to exactly exploit that because it's been explained on Reddit already, then it's a little bit of an odd spot.
Yeah, interesting. Yeah, Jackson went on to say that he gave an example of exactly how kind of granular they can get. He said, I can look and I can and do look at things like win-loss data that's filtered by different leagues, game modes. Can also see hero pick and ban popularity with this type of granularity, which lets me see, for example, what the meta is looking like in Bronze through Silver, as well as Diamond through Grandmaster. That'd be cool if they could pull up tournament customs.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I feel like, yeah, because if you knew like the battle tag of one player on each side, I bet it would be relatively easy to find that game if it's something that's searchable.
Right. I would think that even though we put no match history, they would have that data.
Yeah. Interesting. Interesting.
I mean, I still have the replay, so I have the data at least.
We should talk about Hot Slugs things after the show.
Yes. Definitely.
Yeah. So yeah, and speaking of which, we're basically at the end of the show. Real quick, by the way, if anyone hasn't noticed, there was a major issue on Hot Slugs this week. While we're making quick allusion to the website, we basically lost all the data, and it's being fixed. But funny enough, while we were doing essentially transferring the data, it became corrupted. And this was the week we were going to start looking into backup solutions, and unfortunately it was too little too late. So this does mean you are going to have to re-register if you're a Hot Slugs user, and we would really appreciate it if you did go and re-register. We're already catching back up at an insane pace. In fact, one of our programmers, Jagged, is in the chat room right now saying just during the show, 40,000 uploads have processed. So it's going swimmingly.
You guys made a damn good uploader is what happened there.
Just casual 40K.
Yeah, just a casual 40,000 uploads over the course of just the recording of this podcast. So it's coming back very quick, and obviously the team has learned so many lessons over the course of resurrecting the site that coming back from this is going to go infinitely quicker than getting the site back from ground zero, essentially. So yeah. Anyways, if you could do us all a favor, go to hotslogs.com if you were already registered before and re-register. We'd really appreciate it. And thanks to everybody. We've only had like one person call us an asshole. Everyone else has been like, oh man, we feel so bad this happened to you. We're so sorry. So thanks so much for being understanding, everybody. It was like such a tiny thing that led to such a catastrophic failure. And we now know what to do so that it doesn't happen again. So thanks for the help, everybody. It's been up until this point, it's been going swimmingly. So we're going to just get right back to that. And so thanks for the help, everybody. We really appreciate it. So here at the end of the show, before we get into our long-winded outro, Bahamut, as our guest today, where can everyone find you, keep up with you, watch your casting, watch your stream?
Everything is Bahamut Gaming. Twitch, Twitter, and YouTube. Those are the main three sources. I post on Twitter in the morning when I'm going live. Typically Monday through Thursday is casting for me. Do you mind if I post or plug my cast later today?
I don't mind if you plug anything in particular. Plug
cool.
anything you would like.
We're doing S Division later. We're gonna have two best of fives later on tonight. And Celeb Gaming versus Regen is gonna be the last match of the night, and that one's going to be the best. It's the top seeded, and it's the number 1 and 2 seeded teams for North America. So definitely watch those starting at 5 o'clock PST, 8 o'clock EST. But yeah, Twitch, Twitter, YouTube, all of that is Bahamut Gaming, and typically Monday through Thursday, right around 5 o'clock, I start casting.
Rad. Well, everyone, you should go check out Bahamut, support him, and support Grassroot esports, which I have a feeling you probably understand that that's a big message from today's episode, given our conversations.
Go seriously, just like you don't have to give subs, you don't have to donate bits, like just go lurk in people's channels, go cheer on teams. Like that's the biggest thing. Like the reason I do it is because I've always wanted to put on a good production, and I want to put these players on a platform. So come watch some people who just want to be highlighted, have fun, and it's a good time. Like we make jokes. I honest to God, I have a bot in my in my Twitch channel called Buttsbot, and it randomly changes one word out of someone's sentence to butt, and it's something we all laugh about. So it's honestly, it's my friend sent it to me, and it's the best thing I've ever read in my stream. So yeah, come check us out for Buttsbot, but maybe stay for the casting.
It's great. There's some phenomenal personalities over there. I have a feeling if you're listening to this, it's probably more for the personalities than for the information. Because you listeners home, you could go read patch notes. You could go look at statistics. You're probably here for the personalities, and there's some fantastic personalities out there in the leagues right now. So go give it a look and support it. If you want to support this here podcast, we do have a Patreon. Check it out, patreon.com/ITN. Huge thanks to our Patreon producers, Declan H, Cheesy Bob, Chris K, Mike C, and Robert M. Thank you so much for the support. You can catch us live usually Thursdays around 3 p.m. Eastern Time right here on twitch.tv/AMoveTV. And you can follow the show on Twitter at ITNcast. But before we go, Kyle, you do things other than just ITN. Where can everyone find you?
I do. You can find everything I do over at kyleferguson.com. This last week, fired up Season 4 of DM Gives Inspiration, the 5th edition advice show. First show of this season is about running time travel, which I really, really like doing, particularly to the post-apocalyptic that's the future, but it's apocalyptic. That's the best one. You can also find me on the Heroes Hearth channel this last week. I joined up on the Wednesday stream and battled it out and had a fabulous time. And I may not be on camera much because I'm in solo lane right now, but we had such a good time. You should check that out. And I look forward to being on those Heroes Hearth streams more in the future.
Everyone should go check that out. Folks, you can find me on Twitter at GarrettArt. This podcast and every other podcast I produce can be found at amove.tv. A damn near 2-hour episode of The Angry Chicken went up last night because Hearthstone Battlegrounds just got the single biggest update it has ever received since its damn launch. Also, a new WoW killer went out yesterday. Taliesin and I talked about our favorite and least favorite characters in World of Warcraft, and that includes our own playable characters. That's right. We took a dump on our own tunes. We were like, you, Death Knight, I'm sick of your Breath of Sindragosa. It sucks. So go give that a listen wherever podcasts can be found. Also, I hear tale that Let's Talk About Star Wars will be returning next week to talk some Clone Wars. So go subscribe to that. It's going to wrap it up for this podcast. Thanks again, Bahamut, for stopping by. Go give him a follow at Bahamut Gaming everywhere, Twitch, Twitter, etc. And until next time, good luck and have fun, everyone.
Take care.